This is the Magic Method, where our passion is Magic the Gathering, and our madness is terminal, and not at the cost of discarding. Welcome to the Magic Method.
Warning, the contents you're about to see are made from a Yu-Gi-Oh player. If things need improvement, again, I play Yu-Gi-Oh, and I apologize for that. Aside from that, let's get started with this. I'm the Mise, and right here, I have a very unique blend for you, that of which uses Infect and Cascade. So I got some dishwashing, fairly good engine. Infect, cheesy degenerate as all hell, but let's get into it. Again, at the end of the video when you're done, or looking over a list or anything like that, if you have any suggestions for improvement, I am more than happy to take those suggestions. It betters my efforts, it betters the content we present to you. Without further ado, let's get started with this Infect Cascade profile I have for you, featuring Yidris, the Maelstrom Wielder, as the commander. Let's check this out. So, Yidris, the Maelstrom Wielder, 4-drop, 5/4, has Trample, which is just fantastic, especially given its ability. When this creature deals combat damage to an opponent, any spell you cast from your hand after that has Cascade, which is absolutely huge, because not only do you bring a presentable offense, but you bring up a board which is even more difficult to get around afterwards. So again, you shut the door and lock it with Yidris, and then, the wall behind it, the after effects, that's where the fun really comes in. Let's check out more of these after effects. Starting with creatures here, I use the Mystic here, the Rattleclaw. Really good. It affects 3 colors for mana production, which is really good, very beneficial. Also as well, I do happen to use Sylvan Caryatid, 2-drop, Defender, Hexproof, add any mana color to your mana pool. Very effective as well, just as much as other mana producing sources that may not even be creatures. Next, with the Infect line, I have Blight Mamba. I can regenerate it for 2. It has Infect. Up to 10 poison counters your opponent loses. Every little bit can count, especially if you could bring out guys like this really quickly. I have the Necropede, also Infect. When it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may put a 1/1 counter on target creature. It can help out pretty well, not so much against the bigger guys, but if you happen to get out early game, then you have the opportunity to get rid of some early field build, and that way you can start swinging around, really reap the benefit of the Infect muscle. Speaking of which, Blighted Agent, it's another 2-drop, 1/1. The Blighted Agent is unblockable, and it also has Infect. Given that there is a lot of muscle power out there, which unfortunately I didn't pack too much of it in there, because I didn't want to clog it up too much with muscle support that I wouldn't be able to reap the benefit of. Right now, I am regretting that decision, and I look forward to putting in more. Again, if you have any suggestions, feel free to drop a comment there. Let me know what you think is best to use. Going on from there, in our 3 drops, I have the Daring Apprentice. Tap and sacrifice to counter target spell. Needless to say, it's a good chump block, really, if it comes down to it. But more importantly, it provides an excellent counter spell use. Shardless Agent. It's one of my Cascade creatures. Green and blue, 3-drop, 2/2 Cascade. When I cast the spell, exile cards from the top of my library until I reach one that's under 2. A lot of the times, I end up hitting into a tutor or one of the mana producers like Rattleclaw or Sylvan Caryatid. It ends up being really beneficial in the long run because it's good to start with early game. The Viridian Betrays, it has Infect as long as an opponent has a poison counter, which we hope to produce a lot of in this deck, especially given the Cascade support. It's a 3/1 for a 3-drop, not bad, and it's easy for your opponent to draw their attention to it, especially if he has his ability kicked in. Eternal Witness, pretty stable card, 3-drop, 2/1. Enters the battlefield, take a card from your graveyard and add it to your hand. And this could mean any given choice that you have at any given point in the time in the game. Eternal Witness is good at any point in time in the game as long as you have the mana to be able to reflect its capability. I have the Mycosynth Fiend. Gets +1/+1 for each poison counter your opponent has. Given the circumstances, if they have a few, it's still good because, you turn your basic 2/2 into like a 4/4 or 5/5, that kind of thing. If they're up there, they got to focus on either heavy life loss or getting those poison counters, in which case getting the poison counter stuck there means less muscle for them, more aggro control of the field for you. Going on to Razor Swine, it has First Strike. First off, 3-drop, 2/1, of course. It also has Infect, and having First Strike, you can take that good shot on your opponent, and chances are a lot of the time, especially early game, you can get rid of a weak creature, whether attacking or blocking, just by being able to have the First Strike ability. It's super convenient. I imagine it's pretty underrated for even like the best of Infect users. The Phyrexian Crusader is very well renowned ever since the new Phyrexian American block came out. Opposite its white counterpart, it has a First Strike, protection from red and from white, and it has Infect as well. That's actually huge considering a lot of the really heavy support is in the white category, alongside the reds, which is more aggro and damaging. Going on, I got a Blackleaf Goblin, haste and Infect. Good start just to get a quick shot, and your opponent can block into it, of course, but I wouldn't recommend it, especially if they want to lose like an early game resource. The Core Prowler, it has Infect when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, proliferate. So, chump blocking, field destruction, it works in your benefit because it just adds on counters, it just adds on poison counters, and it's a good way to accelerate the game. Ever since the beginning, I've been a pretty huge fan of copying other people's styles, especially being a Yu-Gi-Oh player, and I'm net decking, taking like the only 3 meta decks available out there. I mean, there's just so much more variety in Magic, thus making clones so much better to tackle that much variety. 4 costs, 0/0, but don't worry about that. It's going to turn into that beefy thing you want to copy. One of my personal favorite Cascade cards, something that can just cheesily regenerate. It has flying to get around those pesky flyers that happen to bother you throughout the game that you can't take care of, and it has Cascade. Throughout the 3 or less cost stuff that we have so far, Cathari Remnant is a great way to get into those. So is Bloodbraid Elf. I don't need to explain the detail about this one to you. It's overall a great card, quick, easy damage, great way to cast spells with no mana being paid. Now, I delved into Kess, the Dissident Mage, because being able to have access to resources I can use over again, really important in a format that you can only use one of each card of. 3/4 flyer, triple color, red, blue, red. Good in either, just basic Grixis stuff, 4 or 5 color stuff, however you want to use it. I just find it's really useful in here. Vizier of the Menagerie. I thought this was just a nice tool to have fun with. It gives me the opportunity to cast my Infect spells before they come into my hand, and it's a real hit or miss. I could potentially brick with it. My opponent could see what's coming, but if there's not a whole lot they can do about it anyway, I shouldn't be too worried about it. Next is the Ogre Menial. The Ogre Menial has Infect, and it has a fire breathing capability. So for 4 costs, 0/4, a great blocker, and if you have the excess mana for it, you can turn it into something to just slowly turn your opponent's creatures off. Next is the Tangle Angler. It is a 4 cost 1/5. Great blocking material. Target creature blocks Tangle Angler this turn if able for 1 green, and it has Infect. Very important to utilize, especially for those smaller kicker ends, 4 or less power. If your opponent has some muscle booster stuff and gets rid of it, again, there's going to be enough return stuff in here suggestively to have that taken care of. I find Mercurial Chemistry is good in this color scheme because it's a cheap draw engine and just kind of like, a decent chump blocker for that matter. Also as well, if your opponent's standing on last legs, paying life, or just overall damage in general, whether it's by Infect or not, you got a great way to deal just some excess damage to target cards or players all in general. Havengul Lich is a pretty well-known mythic coming from the Innistrad block, 5 cost 4/4, black and blue. I can cast a creature from the graveyard. Pretty neat stuff, and coming with additional abilities that it has, I can find can be very beneficial for an Infect deck. The big Papa Bear of the house, Skithrix, he's that major muscle boy, he's the face of the Infect, more or less. This Dragon Skeleton gives you the capability to regenerate him, or, has hasten to the end of the turn. Yeah, that's actually huge stuff if you have the extra mana for it. Great and quick, easy, almost half the amount of poison counters gone. Reaper of Shieldred. Of course, in fact, if a source deals damage to Reaper, then that source's controller gets a poison counter. So watch out, ladies. This boy comes with a disease. Putrefact's great aggressive infect card, has trample and haste, so regardless of the situation, you're going to be mostly clobbering over, dealing that excess infect damage in no time flat. Phyrexian Hydra is pretty good as well. If a source would deal damage to it, prevent that damage, put a -1/-1 counter on it. Not bad, especially for 5 cost 7/7. It really gathers some heavy focus, heavy concentration on it to get it off field. By its own effect, that would be a little bit too slow. Somebody could come out with something that could just ram right on through, and it still have enough power to take care of that. You need to get this off field like as soon as possible, and thus, it gives opportunity for the smaller guys to swing through. Spinebiter, I feel, is, no pun intended, a pain in the neck or a pain in the ass, spine intertwining with both, all that jazz. But basically, regardless of what goes down, you're going to be dealt some infect damage. So again, some muscle pumping would be really fantastic in this kind of thing, because if you're using stuff like a Garruk, or if you're using overruns, anything like that, it's a great amount of poison counters you can deal to your opponent, along with some excess damage on top. Swinging back into the dishwashing, we got my homeboy, the Ethereum Horn Sorcerer, probably one of my more favorite Cascade cards, because 6-drop for 3/6 is a pretty decent wall, but more importantly, aside from the Cascade ability, you have the ability to return them to your hand. If it's late game and you got that heavy mana count, you just drop them, pop them, drop them again, and you can start the shenanigans all over again, especially if your opponent happens to be under the damage effect of Yidris. Then that's pretty much a Cascade, return to hand, drop, and then, you just go off of more Cascades, and again, you just wash those dishes, baby. Wash those dishes. Next coming up is the Phyrexian Juggernaut. Pretty well-renowned reference into the whole Phyrexian story arc. Phyrexian Juggernaut has Infect, attacks each turn of Fable. That doesn't sound familiar. 5/5, of course. Going on into a little bit more support, I find Runescar Demon is really good tutor support, as well as just heavy flying damage. Because a lot of the time, an opponent may have something pretty big on the field, but it's not going to be big enough to swat the fly out of the sky. So you're going to go getting all sorts of deck-style shenanigans. You're clearly going to have the mana to pay for it. So again, stick with that Yidris, deal that damage, infect the hell out of your opponent, and get those resources out there. Next is Dragon Mage. Any deck that runs red will know that a brick hand is a brick hand. And if you have the capability to bring this guy out reanimation-wise, hard casting, however it may be, totally mess things up with him. Reap the benefits of a whole new hand, especially if you draw 7 new ones. If you have 3 cards in hand, 2 of them are land, and 1 of them's completely ass, don't worry about it. This is the TP to wipe that ass, and it's going to clean up the mess for you. And the final of the creatures, of course, the Maelstrom Wanderer, probably one of my favorite cards in Magic the Gathering, an 8-cost, green, red, blue. You can Cascade twice, so you start off by Cascading once, and then through the effect again, so you can Cascade for anything that costs 7 and under. Creatures you control have haste, which is also a huge deal, because if you manage to rock this guy out late game and your Yidris needs to come out and you haven't brought it out yet, or you brought it out once or twice, totally cool, rock that baby out and then just start swinging in. Your opponent can only take so much. So that's pretty much it just for an initial creature count. I'd certainly make benefit of them as often as possible. And just going on to the non-creature ones, I do have some planeswalkers that I do use for support. They help pretty often. I should utilize them more often than I normally do. But at any rate, Garruk Wildspeaker, everyone's favorite green giant. He's got the ability to untap lands. You can untap the balance lands, which gives you opportunity for 4 mana as opposed to the 2 that you would normally untap for. You can put a beast out there just for chump blocking to save them. Or, again, you got good muscle production there, so you can start pumping your creatures up. Next, I got Kiora. It's a good color blend into it. I can untap up to 1 target creature and 1 target land. Again, that's another 2 mana I can use later. The other ability that I would use more prominently is the -2, reveal the top cards of your, reveal the top, 4 cards of your library, creatures and lands and all that jazz. Get that stuff, get those resources, wash those dishes. Next is Liliana Vess, classic planeswalker, and all the way back from lore when target player discards a card. Good control. Don't know how well it will affect him in the long run, especially early game, but you never know. It's there for a reason. The -2 effect, of course, pretty much a diabolic tutor, just a little bit extra casting and ability using, but it's worth it in the long run. And if you happen to get her up that high, hey, who doesn't love a swarm of infect monsters coming into play? Especially you got a Maelstrom Wielder out there where you just want to set up a nice cheesy wall your opponent can't get through a couple of turns. I use a Mu Yunling primarily because of her +2 ability. It gives that one creature that you may need to swing in through the infect damage the ability to do so, and especially if you're using it alongside of Spinebiter, and you have the opportunity to get that shot in, take it, because some people apparently don't take this shot in, and I blame it on the Yu-Gi-Oh. Last but not least, I got the boss man himself. He's well renowned regardless of what effects you use. He's a god pharaoh, he's a deceiver, but most importantly, he's a planeswalker. Nicol Bolas is in here because of his trifecta color of convenience. I can do everything from deal damage to take control of things, to rid you of useful resources in your hands, to more or less make a bad day for my opponent. So each of these ones, I haven't included the M19 one yet. I assume that I'm going to be taking out something less aggro-ishly for the non-creature spell so that I can fit him in there, because I love this beauty. He's a fantastic villain. And going on to other non-land spells, I use Wheel of Fate. Great to open with, great to cascade into, actually. I mean, like, who doesn't like to cascade for nothing? Especially if you cast a tutor under Yidris and then all of a sudden you come into a Wheel of Fate. Okay, free hand. It's all right. Soul Ring. Who doesn't love 2 free mana? Worldly Tutor. I want to get those creatures that I need. I want to get them quick. Mystical Tutor. I want to get those things that'll help me get other resources, that'll help me defend my field or provide a functional situation where I can get rid of my opponents. Another helpful resource, Swiftfoot Boots, excuse me. This time equipped for 1, but it has hexproof and haste, which is slightly a bit better, only under the process that you'll be able to target your own stuff. Counterspell, of course, common amongst, blue and blue splash. Lightning Greaves, 0 cost, Shroud and haste. Phoresis is a really good enchantment. I find this probably one of the most busted commons to ever come out of that time or any time for rather. I mean, giving infect to any creature for 2. It's absolutely fantastic. Animate Dead, again, going back to the whole revisiting your resources so you can utilize them again, very important, whether you search out different variants of them or you're reviving them out of grave. Dark Steel Ingot is a good indestructible mana reproduction. It's great for, if you can be up a mana ahead of your land production. It can be very beneficial in the long run, and the chances of that kind of thing just present more opportunity. Polymorphous Jess, I really enjoy being able to shut down a lot of my opponent's creatures, blocking into them with cheap infect stuff. So even if they power them up and during the end phase they go back down before they turn to the regular creatures and poof, really nice. Turns off abilities, even better. Cultivate, because need that mana production and need that swibbity booty. And to light that fire, I got the Chromatic Lantern. Use any color, anytime. Who wouldn't want to use it? Far Wandering, I find it's a good land search, early game or late game, especially with a threshold ability. Even if it's forest, mana can be mana as long as I have a proper coordination of the various colors that I use. Bontu's Last Reckoning, good early game, good. I guess it's kind of okay like mid game, but late game is just absolutely not really all that great to do. But it's a great means of field control, getting rid of your opponent's creatures for 3. It's a good twist for things to change. Thran Dynamo. One of the local stores that I used to go to before they moved out of that location, they were in Dundas, Ontario. They had the store owner running Thran Dynamo in his band, and I thought, that's kind of odd. Isn't there more mana production you can use from that? He's like, honestly, being able to utilize it every turn is fantastic, and having their focus on that means one less resource for them. So as I go back to the whole, gathering your opponent's focus as best you can. Cryptic Command, pretty well a stable blue card. Triple blue is a little risky, but it's totally fine in the long run. You can get rid of stuff, you can draw cards, you can field control, and most importantly, you can counter spells. That puts you up in the lead in my book by any means. Harmonize, additional cards are additional cards, and it's good to have those, in excess, unless you can't afford them, in which case you just have a bulk hand to work with. Diabolic Tutor, good search. I'm going to let you know now I don't have a Demonic Tutor. I'm going to have that taken care of shortly. I just couldn't, go out and attain that resource at this time. Triumph of the Hordes, speaking of resources, probably one of the most important ones ever, because your stuff that doesn't have infect now has the capability to rock your opponent's world just by utilizing every creature that you have. With the Cascade effect, if you happen to have the luck of running into multiples, then it's just going to be even more of a benefit for you. Decimate is a great card because it shuts down multiple resources for your opponent, multiple different types of them. So 2 red-green, having that, to your advantage, you're going to be a step ahead. Damnation, everybody's favorite boy toy in this playbox. Everybody likes destroying an inconvenient field, especially when it can't be saved. Rewind, 2 blue, 2 colorless. I imagine this is still a pretty popular card because you get to untap 4 lands after. And again, a huge fan of the bounce lands that I am. This could not be more important for specifically those, let alone the regular land you're using. The Corrupted Conscience, much like the Pheresis, enchants the creature and gives it infect. The difference between the two, however, is that this 3 colorless 2 blue enchantment will allow you to take the creature and give it infect. So your opponent drops an Eldrazi on you. As long as the game's not completely over and you can afford it, bang. You can have that game turned around. You can shut down your opponent just as quickly. Deny Reality, another blue card, but more specifically blue-black. It has Cascade and return target permanent to its owner's hand. That's permanent, any card on the field, as long as it can be, affected by a set effect. From there, you Cascade under 5, so 4 or less. You can probably run into something pretty handy. I have Gilded Lotus, generic mana ramp, 5 and 3 of 1 color to your mana pool. Now, the difference between that and the Dynamo, it's a 1-cost difference for almost the same thing, but this is color coordinated specifically as opposed to Thran Dynamo, which gives you just the excess bulk mana. Devastation Tide. Ever since I started with the Unearthed stuff and I played the Kedark Leviathan, I just fell in love with the aspect of the whole Leviathan, just, splash in the water and everything comes right up, and which means that you have the opportunity to replay your resources and not just from graveyard. The Miracle Cost adds in, especially for top deck situations, and I think it's really beneficial. Butinous Blast is a great burn card for a red, a black, and 3 colorless, especially with the Cascade effect. Dealing 4 damage to target creature isn't a bad way to go in regards to control and overall field advantage. Dark Petition, I find, is another great 5-cost tutor. You search your library for a card and add it to hand, but with the Spell Mastery ability, if it comes up late game, even more mana for you. That's just all the better to cast more spells in Cascade with. Last, I have the lands. Going to the non-basics, I have Command Tower. Let's see here. I have the Exotic Orchard as well as a Path of Ancestry. Producing all kinds of mana colors is really important. It doesn't matter if you can produce white or not. You're not using it anyway. But as for the other colors, great by any means. The Path of Ancestry gives the ability to scry when you cast a creature of said commander's colors. The Command Tower, pretty basic stuff. So aside from that as well, I happen to use quite a bit of the cheap lands because they got great effects to them and they're just minorly convenient sometimes, which can be majorly convenient in most cases. So Thornwood Falls, Swiftwater Cliffs, Rugged Highlands, and the Dismal Black Waters, all of them are the same thing but with different mana productions. They all gain life when they come into play, but they do come into play tapped. So they don't have to be used right away, but just being able to know that my life total is being well looked after is kind of okay. In the long run, I imagine there's better lands, but these are always a nice go-to to begin with. I was making mention before of bounce lands. Simic Growth Chamber, Is It Boilerworks, the Dimir stuff, and then the Rakdos Carnarum. These guys give you a dual amount of mana, and they come into play tapped, but more importantly, they bounce lands back here. And so make sure you have the land available to bounce. I would recommend bouncing a basic land card, just so you're not stuck with a card that has to come into play tapped and you're set back a resource. Speaking of stuff that comes into play tapped, I know I play a little bit much of them, but I find the resources are incredible. I have the Crumbling Necropolis, I have the Savage Lands, and probably find Sauron cooking up some mutant mess there. I have the Opulent Palace, and I have the Frontier Marge Boobiac, or Beaverwhack, however you'd like to say it, Beaverwhack. Going on to just the basic lands, I have 5 islands. I have, let's see here, that's there, 5 forests, 4 swamps, and 4 mountains. There's not a whole lot of these guys in there, though I could probably find better uses just out of using the basic lands, especially then if I have the immediate cost set for resources that I need to use. But in the meantime, though, I do enjoy having fun with said lands, and I do enjoy having fun with said deck, having to be able to use these resources. So again, guys, if you happen to have any suggestions as to what you think could improve the deck greatly, I would be more than happy to take those into consideration, and I look forward to, and of course promise to give you a more updated version of this deck in the future, especially with said suggestions to help me on my way to making this the most brutal powerhouse that I can make it. So I am the Mise from the Magic Method. Feel free to give a like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, and we'll have all the information there for you. So again, thanks for seeing the deck, and we will catch you on the flip side.